On to other news now. Iran may face a second outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. The outbreak may come as the Islamic Republic banned internal travel and traditional gatherings in parks during the Persian New Year holiday period. President Hassan Rouhani has banned any new trips between cities and warned of legal steps against people ignoring the ban. The escalating outbreak in Iran has killed 2,077 people so far, with 143 deaths recorded in the past 24 hours. At a meeting telecast live, Rouhani said more restrictions would be introduced to contain the coronavirus that has infected 27,017 people nationwide. The government has so far stopped short of imposing a lockdown on Iranian cities. Authorities have called on Iranians to avoid public places and stay at home, while schools, universities, cultural and sports centers have been temporarily closed across the country. Rouhani said the new measures would be implemented for 15 days until the 4th of April, when under normal circumstances, schools open in Iran after the New Year holidays. Now joining us on Skype for the latest from Iran is Professor Saeed Marandi of the University of Tehran in Iran. He is on Skype. Professor Marandi, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Thank you for having me.
Is the coronavirus getting out of control in Iran?
I think it's fair to say that it has stabilized, but over the last 2-3 days, we've seen another rise in the number of people who've been infected. And there has been a debate going on in the country about the extent of measures that should be taken to contain the virus. Many have been critical of the Rouhani administration from not being strict enough. So today, after, as I said, we've seen a rise in the number of new cases, President Rouhani announced, as you've rightly pointed out, that parks will be closed and travel between cities will be restricted, although there won't be a lockdown inside cities, but many of the shopping malls and all unnecessary shops and centers will be shut down for the remainder of the holiday season. So there are going to be more restrictions, not as many as in some countries, but we'll have to see what happens.
And the fact that Iran has rejected foreign aid to fight or contain coronavirus, why?
No, Iran has not rejected foreign aid. In fact, the Chinese have provided Iran with the most amount of aid among any country. The only issue that happened was that a French organization, Doctors Without Borders, they came to Iran and wanted to set up a small hospital with 40 beds and a number of staff patients. And the Iranians said, we don't need extra beds. We have more than enough beds, and that we have more than enough physicians and staff in hospitals. Right now, almost half of our beds are still empty, and the army has set up thousands of new beds and hospitals for potential outbreaks of the virus. So what Iran needs is supplies and medicine, and Iran has given a list of what it needs. And this organization has not provided Iran with those things. So what Iran is saying is that what we do not need are staff, what we do not need are beds, but what we do need is equipment, supplies, medicine that have been declared by the Foreign Ministry and is online.
Well, my understanding of Iran's health minister, Mr. Alireza Vahabadeh, his advisor actually to the Iran's health minister, and I'm just going to quote you verbatim, he said that due to Iran's national mobilization against the virus and the full use of the medical capacity of the armed forces, it is not necessary for now for hospital beds to be set up by foreign forces, and their presence is ruled out. This is an insinuation that he does not need any foreign assistance.
No, that has nothing to do with foreign assistance. What he said was that Iran does not need additional beds because Iran has more than enough beds right now. Iran has more than enough staff in hospitals. There's no shortage of hospitals. There's no shortage of hospital beds. And the armed forces have created even extra beds and hospitals in case they're needed. So setting up a 40-bed hospital for Iran when the country has roughly 140,000 beds is not going to do anything for us. It's going to distract the country and foreign potential supporters from the fact that Iran needs supplies, not beds. Iran needs medicine, and it's because of the sanctions that Iran needs supplies and medicine and equipment, because the Americans are preventing Iran from importing it. The Americans are determined to prevent Iran from getting the necessary equipment and medicine and supplies that it needs. And by just bringing a few beds to Iran, this organization is distracting attention away from Iran's real needs. Iran's real needs is for countries to break the American sanctions, to allow Iran to have billions of dollars. Iran has billions of dollars in its bank accounts in Korea that are frozen, in Japan where they're frozen, in Luxembourg. These countries have frozen Iran's bank accounts. They will not allow Iran to use their money to purchase medicine at the orders of Trump, at the orders of the United States. So Iran needs those sanctions to be broken. And if countries want to provide aid to Iran, Iran has provided a list of what it needs. So when this organization brings in a few beds, it is only distracting attention away from Iran's real needs. It's not beds, it's medicine that the Americans are depriving us from. It is hospital equipment that we're being deprived from, and it is supplies, hospital supplies, that the Americans are depriving the Iranian people. The Americans have weaponized the coronavirus in order to create maximum damage. And this is not something new. Remember, in the 1980s, the Europeans and the Americans gave Saddam Hussein chemical weapons to use against Iranians. I survived 2 of those chemical attacks personally, and many others didn't. At the moment, I am vulnerable to the virus because of the effect that those chemical attacks had on my lungs. So the Americans are using this virus right now to create maximum pressure on Iran. They're depriving Iran of medicine, supplies, and the equipment that hospitals need, so that the virus would spread in Iran and create greater devastation.
Yeah, and it certainly is disingenuous for the Americans, as we've just articulated, to deprive Iranians of the basic necessities to fight COVID-19. But then make us understand, Professor, if you can, why the Iranian authorities had to cancel an MSF mission that was pre-arranged to set up a facility to fight coronavirus in the city of Isfahan.
Well, I think there was a miscommunication between the two sides, because when the team arrived in Iran, they did not bring what the Iranians were expecting them to bring. The Iranians were expecting them to bring experts, specialists to deal with the coronavirus. There were no experts among them, despite the fact that Iran has many experts. Iran has large number. Iran is a country actually where people from different countries come here for medication, for treatment. People even come from the United States and Canada that far away to have operations in Iran because it's less expensive here. So Iran's facilities have traditionally been very good. But in the past couple of years, the Americans, through these sanctions, have been trying to deprive us from our necessary the necessary equipment. And during this time of crisis, the corona crisis that's spreading across the world, it's becoming even more difficult for Iranians to contain the virus. So this team came to Iran. They did not bring experts. They did not bring any of those supplies that Iran needed, nor the medicine that Iran needs and cannot obtain, nor the equipment in large numbers that Iran can use. But the Iranians told this organization that we'll accept any donation that you give, any support that you give, but we do not need hospital beds. We need equipment. We need supplies. We need medicine. And those things have been listed by the foreign ministry of Iran. So it's not as if the Iranians are saying we don't want your help. They said we want the right type of help.
And I suppose the greater accusation here is that the Iranian authorities knew beforehand of the severity and the intensity of coronavirus in Iran, but then the Iranian authorities decided to treat this matter with kid gloves, and they decided to be so cynical about this.
Well, I think that would be a very dishonest argument that such people make. The Iranians discovered the coronavirus on February the 19th. And they received their first testing kit, on February the 17th. So 2 days after getting their first kit, they found the first person who was infected. And on that very same day, February the 19th, Iran declared that there's an infection. And Iran began, look at the United States now, those very same countries and their media that is bound to their governments and close to their governments, they've been making these accusations against Iran. But look what's going on right now in the United States, in England, in Italy, and in Spain. So even though they had more time than Iran, because the virus was announced in Iran far before it was announced in the United States or in any of these European countries. And you know that countries in the region, as we speak, are still hiding their numbers. Turkey, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, these countries are not giving their real numbers. So the Iranians took it seriously from day one. And even those so-called developed countries right now, their numbers have shot way beyond Iran, both those who've been infected as well as those who've died as a result. And the Americans right now are becoming, where you can see what's going on in New York. So it's really hypocritical for them to make such accusations about Iran when they have been completely unsuccessful in dealing with the virus themselves.
Well, we've seen large numbers of people ignoring the warnings, and traffic on the roads was quite huge as the New Year holiday approached. And we haven't seen much drastic action being taken against those. Because, human contact is the catalyst for the spread of this virus.
Yes, and that is something that I hope in South Africa your government takes more seriously. That is a problem that existed in Iran. I think that the administration
the South African government has taken that seriously because the president has imposed a 21-day national lockdown.
Yes, I think that this is an argument that's been going on in Iran. And President Rouhani resisted some of the restrictions. But since over the last 2 days, we've had another increase in the number of those who've been infected, as well as the number who've unfortunately passed away. President Rouhani has accepted the new restrictions. And as you pointed out at the beginning of the program, all parks are now shut down and travel between cities is forbidden. And the bureaucracy, the government, will be shut down for another 10 days at least. And of course, universities and schools are all closed as well. So from today, there is a new policy. Of course, this policy has been evolving. It's been becoming more strict over the last 5 or 6 days. But I think that is a valid criticism, and that the government should have imposed the restrictions that they imposed today last week.
And now Iranian companies say they find it very difficult to process payments with bank, which fear, to risk breaking U.S. rules and risking sanctions themselves. And now the Iranian authorities have now looked to the IMF for further funding to fight coronavirus. Do you think that's the way to go? Do you think that they will get the necessary recourse?
No, I think just as the United States has forced countries to hold Iranian money, and as I said, the Koreans are not giving Iran its billions of dollars. Iran has billions of dollars in Korean banks, billions of dollars in Japanese banks, and billions of dollars in banks in Luxembourg. And also the British government has over $1 billion of Iranian assets. and they're not being handed over to Iran for the virus. Why? Because the United States has told them not to do so. And therefore, I don't think there's any real chance of the IMF, even though Iran pays its share in the IMF, it's a member of the IMF, but the Americans will definitely, in my personal opinion, block the IMF because, as I said, the Americans are using the coronavirus as a tool to hurt Iran. So they want to spread the infection as much as possible in Iran, create as much death and destruction in Iranian society as possible in order to weaken the state. So when the Americans are telling the Koreans you are not allowed to give Iranians their money, and the irony is, of course, that President Trump called the Korean president and asked for help, and the Korean president is sending help to the United States, but the Korean president will not allow Iran to have its money, have access to its own money. So when Iran is not being given access to its own money in Korea, Japan, Luxembourg, and in the UK, then obviously I don't see any reason why Iran is going to be able to obtain a loan from the IMF.
Professor Syed Marandi of the University of Tehran in Iran, thank you so much for your thoughts. Much appreciated.